Hello, I'm attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. And each and every week, we bring you at least one legal analysis of some trending story regarding politics, policies, personalities, or pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy this unjust legal system and to nullify systemic racism. If that interests you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell so you'll get notification every time we drop one of these powerful videos. All right, now, what I want you to do, please, if you have an African-American son in public schools, go to Amazon, get a copy of my book entitled Education and Justice. I wrote this book especially for you. You need to know all the things that the public school system is doing to harm African-American male students and what you can do about those things. So get your copy of this book. I promise you, you will not regret it. All right, so let's talk about another young African-American male. His name is Tyreek Hill. He plays for the Miami Dolphins, and we saw him on video being detained by Miami law enforcement. So I want to do a legal analysis of that detention, and I want to talk briefly about the broader implications of what happened to Mr. Hill. All right, let's kick that off by watching some video.
Controversy surrounding Tyreek Hill and Miami-Dade police after the star wide receiver was detained during a traffic stop while he was heading to the game. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Chelsea Jones. This all happened a few hours before kickoff close to Hard Rock Stadium. And what is getting attention is this video right here. Hill being put on the pavement in handcuffs. We do have team coverage for you tonight, beginning with CBS News Miami's Joe Gorcho. He is live in Miami Gardens. Joe.
Chelsea, we are, and Dolphins fans are still trying to figure out as well what happened that ended up with Tyreek Hill on the pavement as they left the game. Two things were on their mind. One, excitement they won, and again, what happened with Tyreek Hill. And after the game, Tyreek Hill told reporters that he himself was still trying to put it all together as to how he ended up on the pavement in handcuffs.
Get out of the car right now.
Cell phone video shows Miami-Dade police officers telling Tyreek Hill to get out of his car.
Doing what my uncle always told me to do whenever you in a situation like that. Just listen, put your hands on the steering wheel. Just listen.
Moments later, another one shows Hill face down on the pavement, surrounded by officers as he is put in handcuffs.
It happened so fast that it caught me off guard. You feel me?
Officers then walk Hill to the curb, where seconds later, another officer appears to force him to sit.
What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill, bro? Like, worst case scenario.
Why do you believe the police put you in handcuffs?
I have no idea, for real. No idea. No idea, man. It's crazy. It wasn't disrespectful. You know, because my mom didn't raise me that way.
MDPD says it detained Hill, cited him for careless driving, then releasing him to go play in the opener.
I looked, they saying, that's Hill, that's Hill. I said, oh my God.
Pamela told us she watched the entire situation unfold.
Maybe 10, 15 minutes later, that's when the other football player pulled up. And he was saying, twin, you all right?
Defensive tackle Calais Campbell also said police put him in handcuffs. Miami-Dade Police Director Stephanie V. Daniels, in a statement Sunday, said she initiated an internal affairs investigation. One officer involved has been placed on administrative duties while the investigation is being conducted.
That should tell you everything you need to know then.
Dolphins fans left the game happy for the win.
Fins up, we're going to the Super Bowl. Free Tyreek Hill, let's go!
Supporting Hill after what happened.
You didn't have to cuff him, you had to put him on the hot pavement. The pavement was burning hot, and they stuck him down there on that ground. They just broke my heart.
Probably upset him and made him play harder.
Main reason why we came to the game is to watch him, so I'm happy he was able to pull through and get in the game.
Seems like he forgot about it. Just, okay, let's play.
Able to talk to my wife, calm down a little bit, and I was straight, man. Because I know at the end of the day, I still got a job to do.
And we did reach out to MDPD to get a look at the body cam footage following Hill being put in handcuffs. We have yet to receive that video. Live outside Miami Gardens in Hard Rock Stadium, Joe Gorcho, CBS News Miami.
And it will give us a different picture of what happened. Looking forward to seeing that. Joe, thank you for your report. Well, Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava released a statement saying, in part, in recent years, our nation has been confronted important conversations on the use of force, and the internal review process will answer.
All right, so there you have it. Tyreek Hill said he was not disrespectful. He said he put his hands on the steering wheel the way his uncle told him to handle these kinds of situations. We saw on the video the officers knocking on his window and asking him to roll down the window, and I did see the window begin to go down. And then we saw Tyreek lying face flat on the cement, handcuffed. We also saw one of the officers use force to make Tyreek sit down on the sidewalk. Now, what we don't know in that incident was whether or not he was refusing to do so. So there are some very troubling parts of the video. So I want to do an analysis. I can't really do a thorough analysis because I don't have everything in front of me. Let's go to another screen and I'll show you what I'm saying. So to do a thorough analysis, I would handle this incident as though Tyreek walked in our office and retained us to represent him on the criminal and the civil rights cases, right? There are two cases here, possibly a criminal case where he would have to defend himself, or a civil rights case where he would sue the city and sue those cops for the way they handled him under Section 1983, 42 USC Section 1983 of the Federal Code. So in order for me to do a thorough analysis of this, if he had walked into our office, there are several things that I would need that I currently don't have, right? So we would request a detailed statement from Hill himself. We would ask Tyreek, give us a detailed statement. We will walk through that statement with him and got everything from him that we could get, that he could remember about that case. And I mean minute by minute by minute by minute by minute details. So then we would also want to get a detailed statement from all witnesses, right? Like the African-American lady who said she saw everything. We would hire an investigator and have the investigator find that lady, question her, get all the information we can get from her and any other witness out there. We would also obtain copies of all surveillance videos, because to be sure, there were surveillance cameras all around that incident, not to mention all the many cell phone videos that were probably also running as this was happening, right? So you can assume almost anything you do in public nowadays is being recorded either by city, county, or state, or some other law enforcement agency, or is being recorded by other citizens on their cell phones. We would try to get all of that, every bit of that. Then we would also request copies of body and dash cam videos. And we would do that before the case was even filed by filing a request of information. I don't know what it's called in Florida. And by the way, remember, I'm not a Florida lawyer. I'm a Texas lawyer. So some of this, the way they handle things in Florida, I don't know. But I know how we do it here. And so before the case is even filed, or if the case is filed, we would ask the city to give us copies of all body and dash cam video. We would also file a complaint with the city of Miami and request all their records. I believe the city has opened an internal affairs investigation and has put one officer on administrative leave with pay. We would ask for all the records associated with that investigation. We would also ask the county for the probable cause affidavit, whatever law enforcement agency is handling this, whether it is the city of Miami or the county. Here in the state of Texas, it would be the county district attorney's office. So I presume that's the way they do it in Florida. But whoever has that probable cause affidavit, we would ask for that as well. And by the way, what that is an affidavit that law enforcement would fill out and with the magistrate, laying out why they took the steps they took. Okay, a probable cause affidavit. And then we would also ask for a copy of the arrest warrant, if there was one. There may not be one, because I believe after they ticketed Tyreek, they let him go. So basically what they did was detain him and didn't carry out the actual arrest. And I think that is because of some of the things I'm going to show you about Florida law. But whether he was arrested or not, we would want a copy of the incident report as well. So we would get all of that information so that we can do a very thorough, full, complete analysis. All right. So obviously I don't have those things. The facts are still coming out. Videos are still turning up. So I'm going to give you the analysis I can give you with the information that I have right now in the law. Okay. And I say that because it is really important for me as an attorney not to be the first person out here on the story, but to be accurate in what I say, because I am a lawyer and I want to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. right? My credibility is on the line here as a lawyer. So I want to make sure that what I say is accurate. And if I say something that's not accurate, it's a mistake. We're humans, we make mistakes, we make errors. So we just try to correct it and keep it moving. But I have this motto around our firm, which says we measure twice and we cut once. We measure twice and we cut once. I learned that in the military. So you got to make sure you got your ducks in a row before you take any actions. So I stress that here. So we have done the best we can with what's out there right now to ascertain the facts as we know it. So my analysis is going to likely change as more facts and videos and witnesses and so forth come out. All right. But anyway, I think I am able to give you some facts. And by the way, eventually we will, if we were representing Tyreek, we would get all the discovery, all the evidence that the state has against Tyreek, if in fact they follow through with any prosecution. Although my understanding is he got a simple ticket for careless driving or something. I don't know. I'm going to discuss that in just a second. So we would want everything, every bit of information, all the videos, all the witness statements, all the documents, all the records, all the reports, everything. We want everything in our possession, and we're entitled to everything, right? So we would insist that we got that on behalf of Mr. Hill. All right, now, let's walk through a couple of things, because this is the way we would analyze this if, again, Mr. Hill was in our office and we were legally advising him. All right, now let's go to another screen. So the first thing that we would want to know is whether or not there was reasonable suspicion for the stop. Cops are bound by the United States Constitution, and namely in this type of situation, the Fourth Amendment. They can't just search and stop and arrest you. They must comply with the United States Constitution. And so anytime a cop stops someone, he or she must show that they had reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion. Now, let me explain. There are 5 levels or burdens of proof in the law. There's reasonable suspicion. It's the lowest. Probable cause. It's right above that. A preponderance of the evidence. That's number 3. Clear and convincing evidence. That's number 4. And beyond a reasonable doubt, number 5. So cops just need that lowest standard to justify stopping someone. So when they stop him, they better have had reasonable suspicion for doing so. Now, it's reported that they stopped him because of careless driving. Now, we can't just assume that they're telling the truth about that. I know if we were representing him, we certainly would not just accept what law enforcement said. We would look at all the evidence, all the surveillance tape. That's why we need all that, so that we can see if the officer is lying, which, listen, believe me, they lie a lot, okay? I don't want to broadly brush all law enforcement officers, but I'm telling you, we have caught many cops in lies. And I mean under oath, many. So we would definitely not just take their word on it. In fact, whatever Mr. Hill says happened, that is consistent with the evidence, you know, with the videotape, with the witness statements and so forth, then that will become the basis for our theory of the case, right? Not what the cop said. No, what Mr. Hill, our client, said, and what was also substantiated by videos and witness statements and so forth. So the stop must be justified with reasonable suspicion. If not, then everything that happened after that, we would try to get thrown out as evidence by filing a motion to suppress. And that means everything, even if Mr. Hill had violated the law, if the cop was not justified in stopping him in the first place, then everything that happened afterwards would be null and void. Because the U.S. Supreme Court says, according to the Fourth Amendment, we Americans are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. So stopping someone is a seizure. So we need to know whether or not the cops had reasonable suspicion. Now, here's some case law. I'm going to read it to you. You're probably not going to understand it, but I'm going to read it to you nonetheless. The scheme of the Fourth Amendment becomes meaningful only when it is assured that at some point the conduct of those charged with enforcing the laws, which are law enforcement, can be subjected to the more detached, neutral scrutiny of a judge who must evaluate the reasonableness of a particular search or seizure in light of the particular circumstances. And in making that assessment, it is imperative that the facts be judged against an objective standard. Would the facts, listen closely, would the facts available to the officer at the moment of the seizure or search warrant a man of reasonable caution in the belief that the action taken was appropriate? We again call that reasonable suspicion. It's not just a hunch. It is some articulable set of facts that would warrant a stop. And that's in a car. That's also on the streets. If you're walking the streets, if the officer stops you, there has to be reasonable suspicion. If the officer doesn't have reasonable suspicion to stop you, then what I advise our folks to do is to ask the officer, have you detained me? And if the officer says no, then let the officer know that you're getting ready to walk off or drive off. All right. So, and of course you would do that respectfully. I talked about that in another video. But the question, number one question in Mr. Hill's situation, was there reasonable suspicion for the stop? It is reported that they witnessed Mr. Hill driving carelessly, or at least that was the reason they gave for the stop. Now, quite often, as I said earlier, they're lying. So that's why we need dash cam video. We need to see what that video sitting up on their dash showed about Mr. Hill's car. Was he indeed driving carelessly? Otherwise, we're going to immediately file a motion to suppress, ask the judge to throw everything out because they should never have stopped Mr. Hill. He has Fourth Amendment rights to be left alone unless they got some reason, some reasonable suspicion to stop him. All right. But it went further because they didn't just stop him. We saw him face flat with handcuffs on the pavement. So they detained him. You could say they arrested him, but I think that they would argue that what they did really was detain him. All right. So now to do that, you got to go to the next level down. Reasonable suspicion is only for the stop. Now to detain him the way they did, now they need probable cause. So now we're at the second stage of this situation. All right, now, probable cause, this case law says, and this is the U.S. Supreme Court, the substance of all the definitions of probable cause is a reasonable ground for belief of guilt. And this means less than evidence which would justify condemnation or conviction. Remember, that's beyond a reasonable doubt. No, probable cause doesn't ask for that because that's a really, really high standard up there. No, probable cause doesn't ask for that much evidence. But it is more than bare suspicion. Probable cause exists, here it is, where the facts and circumstances within the officer's knowledge and of which they had reasonably trustworthy information are sufficient in themselves to warrant a man of reasonable caution in the belief that an offense has been or is being committed, and I would add, in the person that they're detaining committed that offense. So in other words, the officers need what? Facts and circumstances. Facts and circumstances. So when they go to, because let me share this with you. The general rule is before someone is arrested, they need to go get a warrant from a magistrate. Let me say that again. That is the general rule. The general rule is the cops got to go to the magistrate, tell the magistrate in writing all the facts and circumstances that the officer believes justifies an arrest warrant, and then get the magistrate to sign off on it. Now they got a legal document to arrest someone or to search someone for that fact, both arrest or search. search or seizure. Okay? There are exceptions. There are exceptions. And when one of those or more of those exceptions apply, then they don't need to go to the magistrate to get the search or arrest warrant. So apparently the officers felt like they had an exception where they could detain and or arrest Tyreek Hill. And that's what they did. All right. I don't have everything in front of me to tell you whether or not I believe they had enough probable cause to arrest Tyreek or to detain him. I don't know. All right. It's been reported that Tyreek was being uncooperative, whatever that means. And again, we don't take that for face value. As a matter of fact, we assume that the officers are lying, right? So we're going to challenge that. You know, if the officer says he was being uncooperative, we're going to challenge that. We don't believe them. You're lying. We don't believe what you just said. Our client was not being uncooperative. As a matter of fact, Tyreek said that he was not being disrespectful, had his hands on the steering wheel. I saw the window being rolled down. So we don't have any basis to believe that he was being uncooperative, right? So we would not take that for face value. We would challenge that. And by the way, let's now look at Florida law, because Florida law is really, really important here because we're in the jurisdiction of the state of Florida. So what does Florida law say about this? Florida law says we hold that when a person is charged with violating a municipal ordinance regulating conduct that is non-criminal in nature, such as in the traffic control area, section 901.15, subsection 1, only permits a person to be detained for the limited purpose of issuing a ticket, summons, or notice to appear. A full custodial arrest in such situations is unreasonable and a violation of the Fourth Amendment and Article 1, Section 12 of the Florida Constitution, as Thomas v. State. So what does this mean? This means that if Florida cops stop someone who has violated a municipal order, like a traffic violation, then their Supreme Court has said Section 901.15, which gives officers the authority to arrest someone for a traffic ticket. The Florida Supreme Court said they should not arrest that person. They should detain that person long enough to give that person a ticket, a summons, or notice to appear. That's the Florida Supreme Court. If it is a mere non-criminal municipal ordinance violation, then don't fully arrest the person. You can detain the person long enough to give the person a ticket, a summons, or notice to appear. And there's also U.S. Supreme Court cases that says that that stop, once the officer has confirmed the person doesn't have a warrant, once the officer see that the person is not dangerous, then that stop shouldn't last for no longer than it's necessary to write that person a ticket, to give them a warning or whatever, but don't just hold them there. I've had so many cases where officers would hold the person there until they can get the person to say something incriminating or hold the person there long enough for some other officer to come with some search dogs or something. We've gotten cases thrown out for that reason, right? So once they saw that all he was doing was carelessly driving, and assuming that careless driving in Florida is a non-criminal municipal violation. I don't know if it's non-criminal or not. I would assume that it is. I don't know. I don't know. So if it's a non-criminal type of traffic violation, then what they should have done is given him a ticket, a summons, a notice to appear, and said, bye-bye, Mr. Hill. Have a good game. That's where that should have ended. Why it ended up with him on his face on that sidewalk is the issue. And quite frankly, that brings us to the broader implications of that stop. Because then we start asking, if Tyreek was a young white man, would he have been, on his face for a simple careless driving infraction? If he was a black man, I mean, could that could have gone very wrong. We've seen cops kill black men for doing nothing. So for us African-American men, getting stopped is a big deal, even if it's for a simple traffic violation, because we have witnessed many times cops killing black men for nothing. For nothing. Or a little bit of nothing, right? So that's why we have to be on top of these cases as a community. Which brings me to the last thing. We definitely don't want Donald Trump in office giving these cops prosecutorial immunity. That's what he has promised to do if he's reelected. Because what is that going to do? That's going to embolden cops to be even more brazen and brash and reckless and careless, especially when they're dealing with African-American men. Right? Just think about that. We don't need Trump in office giving cops prosecutorial immunity. In fact, what we need to do is get Kamala Harris in office so that we can get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act enacted, and so that she can sign it into law. Not go in the opposite direction. Trump even said in one of his videos that with his law and order policies, he wants to re-implement stop and frisk policies. Stop and frisk, just stop you. It's pretty much just suspending all of what I just said about reasonable suspicion, right? It suspends with that and just authorizes cops to just stop you and just overlook the Fourth Amendment, basically. Overlook all this case law and just stop you, which is why because Rudy Giuliani was doing this, and I think Mike Bloomberg, when he was mayor of New York City, I believe they had implemented this stop and frisk policy, and they sued the city of New York. Some of the plaintiffs, some of those who had been stopped, they sued the city of New York, and it went before a federal judge who found that stop and frisk violates the Fourth Amendment. And she struck it down and made them stop it. Trump wants to re-implement that. And it's, these young black men who are out here talking about voting for Trump. And they are the ones who will be stopped and frisked the most. What are we doing? What are we talking about? Have we lost our minds? Black men, what are you doing? Those of you who are planning on voting for Trump or not voting for Kamala, are you out of your mind? You're listening to these YouTubers, these what I call pro-black imposters. You're listening to them. And some of them are out here saying that the Democrats are now blaming Trump for what happened to Tyreek Hill. Man, we got to talk about Trump when we talk about law enforcement, because, and by the way, he was just endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. And that really blew my mind, because here Trump is a convicted felon and Kamala Harris is a prosecutor. And the Fraternal Order of Police endorsed the convicted felon over the former prosecutor. You know what that's called? White supremacy. White supremacy. And that tells you that Kamala Harris is on the right side of these issues. If the Fraternal Order of Police rejects her, although she has a 30-year history as a prosecutor, and endorses Trump, who is a convicted felon, and who led a movement that cost the lives of cops, of police officers. That's white supremacy. And why young black men, some of these rappers and these other people, are out here capping for Trump when he's a white supremacist and represents a white supremacist agenda and is chomping at the bits to get back in office so that he can give cops prosecutorial immunity? Do these rappers think that their money will shield them from this? Is that what it is? Do they think, I mean, what are they thinking? They're not thinking. Half of them don't keep up with these issues. Half of them don't know what's going on, which is why I did a video a month or so ago advising black men to stop listening to celebrities and entertainers and athletes and rappers where the political and legal space is concerned. Enjoy their music, enjoy their movies, all of that, but they are not political and legal experts that you should be getting your information from. So we have to talk about Trump when we talk about law enforcement in this country. Absolutely have to, right? Now we're going to follow up with the video soon about Kamala Harris's prosecutorial history. All right, some of you have been asking us to address that. I've been promising you we're going to do it, and we're going to do it. I promise you. And it's not going to be consistent with what you have been told from these pro-black imposters. Just like it hasn't been consistent what you've been told about this anti-Asian hate crime bill, that it was only for Asians. And there's no hate crime bill that has ever been passed or enacted for African Americans. The reason they're telling you these things quite often is because they're repeating what they're hearing. And the source of these things have never sat in a political science classroom. They've never sat in a constitutional law classroom. They've never sat in, many of them, a history class. And yet you out here taking their words for stuff. Are you serious? It is voting the couch and listening to those people. That was why Trump was elected to office the first time. And he's counting on you to do it again. Reject what they tell you because they don't know what they are talking about. I've even had some folks to say, I've dealt with some legal issues in some of my videos, and I've had folks to comment, oh, such and such and such dealt with that and went in details. And the person doesn't have the first iota of information and knowledge and experience on the law or politics. It's probably I'm not calling any names, but someone who does freaking comedy or rap. And they're going to tell me, a lawyer with 2 decades of practicing law and studying these matters, oh, I've already listened to that from some rapper. That's the reason why they target the black community with this kind of foolishness and disinformation in the first place. Because they know some of us are just easily misled. I'm not going to go to the mechanic to get medical advice. Not at all. Are you going to go to the mechanic and come to court with the mechanic and say he's going to be my lawyer? First of all, you couldn't, because he would be arrested for practicing law without a license. And yet out here in these streets, you're going to turn to people who don't know a thing about these issues and give them your ear. No wonder there's so much disinformation in the black community. All right. I mean every bit of that. Because when I got into this YouTube space here and started doing these videos, I couldn't, it shocked me. All the disinformation out here. And all these YouTube imposters telling you all to not vote, not vote, not vote, not vote until you get reparations, not vote until this and that. Look, I want to say up front, I understand those frustrations. And I understand that more needs to be done. And why hasn't there been more progress for certain sectors of our community? I completely understand that. That is the basis of critical race theory. But the solution is not voting the couch. That's not the solution. In fact, the solution is the very opposite, impact voting. And it's definitely not voting for the party that has blatantly made it clear that they're all about white supremacy. All right, so that's what I wanted to share with you about the Tyreek Hill situation. That's my legal analysis with the information that I had, and those are my comments regarding the broader racist implications of what happened to Mr. Hill. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Thank you for tuning in, and until the next time. The conservative GOP attack on our democracy did not end in January 2020. It has continued. In fact, conservatives are planning to level it up. I'll explain in just a minute. Hello, everyone. This is Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice. I am one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every week, we bring you a legal analysis of some story trending about politics, policies, personalities, or pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy an unjust legal system and to nullify systemic racism. If that interests you, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so you'll get notified when we upload one of these awesome videos. I hope you're doing very well. I hope you had a good day. I hope you've had a good week so far. I have, although I've been dealing with some minor coughing and sneezing and so on. I guess it's the change of the weather, but whatever it is, I'm going to get through it, and I appreciate your well wishes and your prayers. But anyway, duty calls, and I need to talk to you about Project 2025. Project 2025. It's beginning to circulate a little bit. Folks are beginning to ask, what is Project 2025? And it's a little bit surprising that more people do not know what Project 2025 is, since the Heritage Foundation has been talking about it, and it's all over their website. Conservatives are planning this tremendous government takeover, but it takes a while for things to sort of get around to the American public. So it's beginning to make its way around the country. And again, folks have begun to ask me what it is. And so I thought this would be the appropriate time to do a video on Project 2025. As the title of this video says, it is an existential threat to our democracy. Again, Project 2025 is an existential threat to our democracy, at least as we know it. Now, existential threat means it threatens the existence of our democracy, literally. And you'll see what I mean when I get into a little bit of what the conservatives are planning for our country, especially if Trump or some other conservative wins in 2025. That's why it's called Project 2025, okay? So it is literally a takeover of the government and a dismantling of certain parts of the government. So let's talk about it a little bit. I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about it because they have really laid it out, and it would require more time than I have in this video. But let's take a brief look, an introductory look. I'll be doing more videos on what Project 2025 is all about in later videos. But for now, let's go to the Heritage Foundation website. The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank that has been around, as they say on their website, for about 50 years, driving and spearheading the conservative movement in this country. And so they have come up with Project 2025. And so let's read a little bit of what their goals are here. So this says, with the Biden administration half over and with the immediate dangers inherent to one-party rule in Washington behind us for now, it's past time to lay the groundwork for a White House more friendly to the right, not friendly to the American people, whether right, left, or center. No, to the right. For decades, as the left has continued its march through America's institutions, conservatives have been outgunned and outmatched when it comes to the art of government. One reason is because the Republican establishment never moved on from the 1980s. Now, what happened during the 80s? Well, Ronald Reagan. That's what happened during the 80s. Ronald Reagan was president from 1981 to 1988, 89, about 8 years. I remember very well. And he was as conservative as they come. In fact, I remember when former President Reagan he started his campaign like Trump. You remember Trump started his campaign coming down the escalators, I think, in one of his hotels, and began to say some very disparaging things about Mexicans. We all remember that. Well, Ronald Reagan did something equally offensive. He started his campaign in, I believe it was Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till had been murdered. Yes, he literally did that. So he was sending a strong message to the Confederates, to white conservatives, to white supremacists, that he was definitely one of them. And that's exactly what Trump did. So here, the Heritage Foundation is saying they did not move on from the 80s. They did not move on from the Reagan administration. And Reagan really, really, really changed things. I'm old enough to remember it very well. The 80s were right after the 70s, and the 70s were a pretty decent time for African Americans. There was a lot of African American pride in the air. It was the time of big afros and high platform shoes and say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Well, the backlash for all that black pride and black power was Ronald Reagan. And the backlash for 8 years of the first black president is Donald Trump. Okay, so you see the parallels? Every time there is some movement to move the African American community forward, there is some backlash, some harsh backlash to try and put that genie back in the bottle, so to speak. So that is, in a nutshell, what Project 2025 is all about. And yes, it is centered around one man, Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump. Okay, if he is reelected with all of his criminal charges and indictments and impeachments and grievances and so on, they plan to hit the ground running. Project 2025 is their effort to hit the ground running. So let's go back to the Heritage Foundation's website. One reason is because the Republican establishment never moved on from the 1980s. Beltway conservatives still prioritize supply side economics and a bellicose foreign policy above all else. Belief in small government, strangely enough, has manifested itself in a belief among some conservatives that we should lead by example and not fill all political appointments. Belief in the primacy of the national security state has caused conservative administrations to defer political decisions to the generals and the intelligence community. The result has been decades of disappointment. They go on and say some other things here, basically, again, expressing their grievances and their desire to take control and get in power over the federal government. And they have basically broken down this Project 2025 into 4 areas. Let's look at them. The first pillar, the upcoming production of the policy book Mandate for Leadership. The second is our online personnel database. The third is our Presidential Administration Academy. And the fourth and final pillar of the Project 2025 is our playbook. So you see they got these 4 pillars here. First, there's the Mandate for Leadership book, which is a policy book. The second is the personnel database, which will consist of all these conservatives, primarily white conservatives, some blacks, as long as they are willing to promote white supremacy, black conservatives can be a part of this as well. And then the third pillar is, again, the Presidential Administration Academy, which will teach the president and all his or her men what to do on day one to start moving their conservative agenda into the American society. The fourth and final pillar, again, is their playbook, where they start trying to implement the policies that are written in the book, Mandate for Leadership. Now, let's go a little deeper here, because they have some specific goals of dismantling certain federal agencies. And let me show you what I mean by that, because Mr. and Mrs. Smith are coming, and they're coming to take over. So what particular government agencies do they have in their minds specifically? Well, the Department of Education, the mission of Project 25 regarding the Department of Education says federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. That is really, 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 really extreme and radical. Eliminate the Department of Education. Now, I'll talk about why in just a moment. When power is exercised, it should empower students and families, not government. In our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fits their needs. What are they saying? Let me interpret it for you. Well, just go back to Brown versus Board of Education. That's all you got to do. Brown versus Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, which mandated separate but equal schools. Brown overturned that, and to their chagrin, to their disappointment, grave disappointment, white and black students were then forced to sit together in schools, learn together, and so on. They never liked it. They never accepted it. They never believed in it. They never embraced it. So what did they do? They sent their kids to private schools, right? They started developing these private schools, these so-called Christian academies, and sent their kids to those schools. And now what they're saying is, we should be able to do that with the money that the federal government spends in education. So give us that money so we can pay for our children's private education in some predominantly white private school, basically. That's what this is all about. Just go back to Brown versus Board of Education. That's it. I mean, this is just birth out of white supremacy. It's birth out of racism. I don't believe in sugarcoating it. I'll just tell it like it is. That's what this is about. That is precisely what this is about. Wanting to put their kids in schools away from African-American children primarily, and wanting the government to cover the bill. And what's that going to do? That's going to essentially defund public education. Now, I wrote a book on this, in fact. Let me see if I can put my hand on. I literally wrote a book on this. Let's see if I can get it. Right here. Let me go to my large screen here. But yeah, right here, I wrote a book, Education and Justice. Right here. I talk about every bit of this in my book, Education and Justice. Get your copy. Go either to InPartPublishing.com or you can go to Amazon. I prefer you do it through InPart Publishing. so we don't have to share any of the royalties with Amazon. But if you prefer to do it through Amazon, feel free. But yeah, go back to Brown versus Board of Education, go back to Jim Crow, go back to segregation. That's what they want. And they want federal taxpayer dollars to fund it. But not just the Department of Education. What else? What other agency have they set their sight on? Well, this one, the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has a long and noble history. That history began with the creation of the Office of the Attorney General pursuant to the Judiciary Act of 1789 and has continued through the creation of the department in 1870, the formation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1908, reforms following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, and to the present day. Properly understood within the framework of a constitutional republic that values ordered liberty, the Department of Justice has two primary functions: protecting public safety and defending the rule of law. Oh boy, the rule of law, defending the rule of law. And yet they want Donald Trump to become the president, a man who has no regards for the law. None. Yet here they're talking about defending the rule of law, and they want a man in office who sees nothing wrong with violating every law so long as it gets him what he wants. Unfortunately, the department has lost its way in recent years and has forfeited the trust of large segments of the American people. In fact, speaking of Donald Trump, if he gets back in office, he is going to seriously weaponize the Department of Justice, and he's going to go after everybody who's trying to hold him accountable. Alvin Bragg, Joe Biden, who else? Letitia James, who else? Fonnie Willis, the special prosecutor handling the documents case, the classified documents case. Is it Joe Smith? I can't remember. Please forgive me. But whatever his name is, oh boy, Trump is going to pick up the phone. First, he's going to put, some stew pigeon in office over the Department of Justice, and with the understanding, go get every one of those people who tried to hold me accountable. I want them indicted. I mean, he said as much. He doesn't even hide it. So when they talk about the rule of law, defending the rule of law is laughable. So they go on to say large swaths of the department have been captured by an unaccountable, bureaucratic, managerial class and radical left ideologues who have embedded themselves throughout its offices and components. Why are they saying that? Let me tell you why they're saying that. They're saying that because it was the Department of Justice that forced white conservatives to stop voter suppression before they gutted the Voting Rights Act. It was the Department of Justice that forced them to stop trying to intimidate Black students back when the Black kids and families were trying to integrate the education system. It was the Department of Justice under Robert F. Kennedy and other administrations that have tried to stop white conservatives from exercising white supremacy and racism and systemic racism. Now, let me be the first to say, as a criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney, I have somewhat of a love-hate relationship with the Department of Justice. There are times when I'm very strongly in support of the Department of Justice, as, for example, when those three men murdered Ahmaud Arbery, it was the Department of Justice under Kristen Clark, a brilliant and tremendous assistant, I forgot her former title, but she's over the Civil Rights Division. And she has been instrumental in using the Department of Justice to bring about civil rights cases where appropriate. And that's what they don't like. She's one of those left ideologues that they're talking about. Someone who is simply, again, trying to prevent civil rights violations in our nation. To them, she is one of those radical ideologues. Now, when Trump was president, and he had Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr over the Department of Justice, everything was fine because those men, for example, Jeff Sessions got rid of all the dissent decrees over rogue police departments. William Barr, of course, did everything Trump said until the very end. So the Department of Justice was their friend then. But when DOJ is trying to fight racism and civil rights violations and voting rights violations and housing violations and all other types of violations, then they want it gone. The same is true with the Department of Education. Oh, let me not forget the Department of Education. It is extremely important, the Department of Education. All of I write about it in my book, all of the discrimination that Black male students in particular, and and Black female students as well, experience in public schools. The Department of Education is there to ensure that does not happen. So why do they want to get rid of it? Because they want education to be controlled by the locals that we have seen in various states who will not even allow history to be taught correctly. They want that crowd. Remember Mr. and Mrs. Smith? They want Mr. and Mrs. Smith controlling education, not the Department of Education. So they are attacking the Department of Education. And if they get in office, they're telling us we're going to dismantle the Department of Education. Why is that, Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Well, the truth is, no matter what they say, in their minds, it doesn't serve their purpose. They're so radical, so woke, so interested in equality and fairness for African American and Latino students that they're no good anymore and we need to get rid of it. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a threat that is much more serious than what we saw in January of 2020 when those folks stormed the Capitol building. I think it was January 2020. What we're dealing with now is much worse. They have changed up. They're saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to storm the building and a bunch of conservatives get locked up because the Department of Justice is so lefty now. No, we're going to get Trump elected or one of those other conservatives elected, and we're going to take over intellectually. We're going to take over politically. We're going to take over by using the law or changing the law or just disregarding the law. Project 2025, I'm trying to tell you, is an existential threat to our democracy as it stands. You know, the thing that has made America exceptional and great is because of its institutions. They don't always get it right. And certainly we African Americans have been on the wrong side of those institutions many times. It's the reason we believe that there is institutional racism. because of a lot of those government agencies that I'm sitting here now in defending, like the United States Department of Agriculture, which helped cheat many, many, many African-American farmers out of their farmland. So I am not sitting here saying that these federal agencies ought to be trusted and so on. No, because oftentimes, instead of being filled with these leftists that these conservatives are talking about, they're oftentimes filled with white conservatives who do African Americans a disservice. But the country is still better with these federal agencies than without them. The Department of Education, I've had issues with the Department of Education. And as I said, certainly with the Department of Justice and the Department of Agriculture and others. I could go on and on, EPA. But our institutions are what makes our democracy tick. We just need to get fair-minded people in those agencies, not these radical conservatives who are coming from all over the country, carrying Trump's water and full of his grievance and his anger. No, that'll move us toward a country that could very well implode. That's not what we want. Not at all. Project 2025 is intended to create just that kind of place. So, what is their biggest beef with the federal government? The federal government has, for decades, been there to try and protect the civil rights of African Americans, from the federal court system to the Department of Education to the White House, depending on who is in the White House. And it's always been this, back and forth, this rift between white conservatives and the federal government. And it goes back to the Civil War, right? It was the federal government that came in and made southern states in the enslavement of African American people. So this has been good, this fight, these conservatives trying to dismantle the federal government has been going on for years and decades, several centuries, you could say. So it's not anything new, but we do need to be woke to it, pun intended. We need to wake up and see exactly what's going on. And any black conservative who's a part of this and trying to basically help these folks set up a white supremacist, white fascist state, shame on you. Shame on you. You don't have to be a Democrat. You don't have to be liberal. You don't have to like Joe Biden. But to help these folks set up this sort of white ethno state, this what could easily become a white fascist state, something like Germany, come on. Shame on you. All right. Those are some of the comments I wanted to make on this Project 2025. You're going to hear more about it from me and from others, and I encourage you to do your own research, and so that you can stay abreast of what they're planning to do. If they can get their guy, Trump, or some other conservative in office elected in 2024, Project 2025 will come to life, and most of us are not going to like what happens. Okay. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for listening, and you have a wonderful rest of your week. Peace.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, just as the new school year is getting underway, the nation is rocked by another shooting, this time at a Georgia high school.
The Biden administration accuses Russia and other nations of once again meddling in the U.S. presidential race. The new steps that are being taken to counter foreign interference.
We have no tolerance for attempts by authoritarian regimes to exploit our democratic system of government.
And Kamala Harris unveils more of her economic plans, including an incentive for business startups. We delve into the two presidential contenders' plans to boost the U.S. economy.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
A successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, uphold freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The Department of Justice is warning that America's elections are once again under foreign assault. More on that shortly.
We start tonight's program in Georgia, where authorities say a gunman opened fire at a high school, killing 4 people, 2 students and 2 teachers. At least 9 others were injured. Police say they have arrested a student who is the suspect, and investigators say they don't yet know a motive. This morning, about an hour outside of Atlanta, all too familiar scenes of chaos. Ambulances and police cars racing to Appalachia High School, Barrow County, Georgia, after reports of an active shooter. Dozens of emergency vehicles and a medevac chopper descended onto school grounds as students sought safety on the football field. All the while, parents worried sick.
I'm shocked because, this is Barrow County and stuff like this never happens here. Going to school, during school, after school, whatever you do, just pray because you never know, when stuff like this going to happen.
Nearly 2,000 students attend Appalachia. The new school year kicked off about a month ago in early August. This afternoon, county officials identified the shooter as Colt Gray, a 14-year-old student at the school. He'll be charged with murder as an adult.
Our school resource officer engaged him, and the shooter quickly realized that if he did not give up, that it would end with an OIS, or an officer-involved shooting.
Judd Smith is the Barrow County Sheriff.
This hits home for me. I was born and raised here. I went to school in this school system. My kids go to this school system. I'm proud of this school system, but I want to make it very clear that hate will not prevail in this county.
In Washington, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said President Biden had been briefed on the situation and called for action from Congress.
Students and teachers deserve to know that their schools are safe. They should focus on learning, not lockdowns.
And the shooting reverberated on the campaign trail. Vice President Kamala Harris began an afternoon event in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on a solemn note.
This is just a senseless tragedy. on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive.
Donald Trump, right on his social media platform, said in part, "Our hearts are with the victims and loved ones of those affected by the tragic event in Winder, Georgia." Another school shooting, another community tonight in mourning.
Now to the day's other top story, foreign efforts to interfere with the U.S. presidential election.
In a press conference this afternoon, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland outlined what he called sophisticated disinformation campaigns undertaken by Russia and other adversaries, promoting lies via fake news outlets and real social media influencers. And Garland issued this warning.
The Justice Department's message is clear. We have no tolerance for attempts by authoritarian regimes to exploit our democratic system of government. We will be relentlessly aggressive in countering and disrupting attempts by Russia and Iran, as well as China or any other foreign malign actor to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy.
Joining us now from the White House is National Security Council spokesman, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. Admiral Kirby, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So these efforts, I think it's safe to say, are a long way from Russian intelligence hacking and dumping emails like they did with the DNC back in 2016. Just before we dig into some of the specifics today, big picture and briefly, what does all of this say to you about how Russian election interference has evolved over the years?
Well, they've gotten more sophisticated, they've gotten more organized, and quite frankly, they've gotten more funding. Support right at the top of the Kremlin. We believe Mr. Putin is witting of this scheme, or these schemes, I should say. There's more than one. But they've gotten a lot more clever. And unfortunately for them, we've gotten pretty clever too. We've gotten pretty smart as well. We were able to detect and monitor these threats. And as you saw today, take action to hold them accountable.
So one of these schemes, as you put it, let's kind of break it down here. The Department of Justice has charged 2 employees of a Russian state-controlled media outlet, RT, saying that they poured $10 million into an effort to distribute content with hidden Russian government messaging. What kind of messaging are we talking about, and where might people have seen that?
Well, a great example of the messaging, for instance, was blaming Ukraine and the United States for the terrorist attack that happened in Moscow several months ago, that we all know was conducted by ISIS. Even ISIS acknowledged that they conducted that attack on that concert hall. So that was one example. Another example was continuing to put out information to undermine Ukraine's fight for its own democracy and for its sovereignty. So it's messaging and disinformation. It's propaganda that tries to undermine public support for what Ukraine's trying to do to defend itself. And a range of other things that Russia wants to do to sort of portray the United States as some sort of evil actor in the world. So there's a series of initiatives, again, to undermine faith and confidence in democracy writ large, certainly undermine faith and confidence in America's democracy.
One of the other schemes laid out was related to the Department of Justice seizing 32 internet domains that they say were used to spread Russian propaganda with the aim of influencing voters in the U.S. and foreign elections, including the U.S. 2024 presidential election. I just want to show for viewers here, the websites were designed to look like U.S. information and news sites like these that you're seeing right now that look exactly like Washington Post articles, but they are not. Admiral Kirby, can these kinds of sites be taken down faster than they can keep going up? Is it safe to assume this information is still out there?
Well, we're certainly going to keep having conversations with tech companies about making sure they're aware of these threats and these actors out there. We have to, rely on them to take the decisions that they deem are appropriate to their own policies and procedures. But we're certainly going to keep having that conversation with tech companies. But I think what you're seeing here, and I'm glad you mentioned the Social Design Agency and what they've been doing as well, is, on one hand, you've got them using RT, a former propaganda outlet, now just a full-on covert influence organization, to work through funding companies, even a company here in the United States, to get them to push information out in the vein of a legitimate media outlet. And they also working at a tactical level with social media influencers. Many of them, as the Attorney General laid out, are simply made up. They're fictional persona, but they're going at it from a media outlet perspective, and they're going at it from an individual social media user perspective.
But when it comes to influencing, especially the 2024 presidential election, Attorney General Garland said that they're seeking a preferred outcome here. What is that preferred outcome? What do you see this Russian propaganda working towards?
They are working towards undermining U.S. policies, the kinds of U.S. policies that this administration has been laboring so hard to pursue around the world, shoring up alliances and partnerships in the Indo-Pacific, supporting Ukraine, obviously.
But is that to say that they're working to undermine the Democratic candidate, in this case, Kamala Harris?
I don't have specific evidence that I can speak to about undermining a particular candidate, but we have seen in the past where Mr. Putin certainly has shown a proclivity for one particular candidate. But again, I don't want to get ahead of where we are right now. Where we are right now is we know that these tools, these vehicles, this funding to sow discord and try to increase disunity here in the United States.
Wouldn't it help people, though, to spot some of this disinformation if they knew if it tends to lean one way or the other?
Well, look, that's one of the things that we did today. Why the Attorney General went public. That's why we here at the White House laid it out, the State Department, the Treasury. I mean, part of the aim of educating the American people is to disclose what we're seeing out there and the kinds of content that they're putting out there. And as I said in my opening statement today in the briefing room, it can't just be the government doing this. We need the help of American citizens to bear a hand here and to carefully and scrupulously take a look at what you're digesting, the news information that you're getting online or elsewhere, to try to make sure that you're getting the absolute best, credible, most accurate information you can.
It is also worth pointing out people start voting in this election very soon, within days. And the last day of voting, Election Day, is just over 60 days away. A lot of this content has already been out there for a while, has had millions of views. Are these steps and actions coming too late to have an impact?
Well, we certainly hope not. I mean, I would just tell you that the timing today was driven by the scope of the investigation that the Attorney General talked about. And he made it clear it's an ongoing investigation. So there may be additional actions here coming. I don't know. But it was driven really by the status of the investigation. That was what was really on our minds. And as soon as we could package all that information up and get it out into the public domain, we wanted to do that.
That's the National Security Council spokesman, Admiral John Kirby, joining us from the White House tonight. Sir, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And we start the day's other headlines in Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelensky has accepted the resignation of his foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba. Kuleba gave no reason for stepping down. His announcement comes as 4 other ministers also submitted resignations. It's set to be among the most significant overhauls of Zelensky's cabinet since the war began. Zelensky, who was in Ireland today, said it was time for a change as the war against Russia drags on.
I am very grateful to the ministers and the entire cabinet team who worked for Ukraine for the sake of Ukrainians. Today, we need new energy, and these steps are connected. They are only connected with strengthening our state in various areas. International politics and diplomacy are no exception.
Meantime, Russian strikes killed at least 7 people and injured more than 50 others in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv near the Polish border. The long-range Russian strikes come just a day after one of the deadliest attacks of the war, a missile attack on a Ukrainian military academy that killed more than 50 people. In the Middle East, Israel's operation in the occupied West Bank shows no sign of letting up after more than a week of deadly raids. IDF bulldozers pushed through the streets of Tulkarm today. Palestinian officials say 33 people have been killed so far. Israel says most of them were militants. The Jenin area has seen the most fatalities, including a 16-year-old girl who was laid to rest today. Her father says she was shot by Israeli forces yesterday when she opened a window curtain during a raid. Israel says it's looking into the incident.
All the neighbors are witnesses. She didn't go to the roof. She didn't hurl a stone, and she wasn't carrying a weapon. She is 16 years old. The only thing she did is she looked from a window, and the soldier shot her in the forehead.
Meantime, in Gaza, the UN's Children's Agency says the polio vaccination campaign has now reached some 189,000 children. UNICEF called the program a rare bright spot in the ongoing war and says it hopes to expand the campaign to harder hit areas. In the UK, an investigation into the 2017 Grenfell Tower disaster found that the tragedy was avoidable. In its final report released today, the inquiry found that mistakes from the government, the construction industry, and firefighters were to blame. The independent investigation started soon after 72 people were killed when a fire broke out at the apartment block in West London during the early hours of June 14, 2017. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said his government is sorry for the loss of life and vowed to act on the report's findings.
I want to start with an apology on behalf of the British state to each and every one of you, and indeed to all of the families affected by this tragedy. It should never have happened.
The report clears the way for law enforcement authorities to finish their criminal investigation of the disaster. The effort had been put on hold to avoid any conflict with the independent inquiry. Prosecutors are not expected to announce any charges until the end of 2026. A global human rights watchdog has implicated Venezuela's security forces in the deadly crackdown on protests following the country's disputed election in July. In findings released today, Human Rights Watch outlined evidence that linked the country's National Guard and police to some of the 24 killings that took place as people protested the outcome of the vote. President Nicolas Maduro said the protests were an attempted coup. And in an effort to distract from anger over the election, Maduro declared on national TV today that Christmas is quite literally coming early.
September is coming, and I said, it smells like Christmas. That's why this year, in homage to you, in gratitude to you, I'm going to decree Christmas starts on October 1st for everyone. Christmas is here with peace, happiness, and security.
Separately, the Pentagon said today that a U.S. Navy sailor has been detained in Venezuela after traveling there on personal business. Officials say the visit was not authorized. The Navy says it's working with the State Department to monitor the situation. In northeastern Nigeria, locals there say at least 100 villagers were killed when suspected Boko Haram militants rampaged through their area on motorcycles. While the death toll is in dispute, local police say more than 50 extremists opened fire on a market and people's homes on Sunday night before setting buildings on fire. The radical Islamic group has killed thousands of Nigerians since launching an insurgency in 2009 that has also displaced more than 2 million people. On Wall Street today, stocks struggle to find their footing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added just 38 points, so mostly unchanged. The Nasdaq dropped more than 50 points, slipping back towards that 17,000 point level. The S&P 500 also ended a bit lower on the day. And there were more victories for Team USA at the Paralympic Games in Paris today. Oksana Masters won her 8th Paralympic gold by speeding to victory in the women's paracycling time trial. In track and field, shot putter Noelle Malka-Maki broke her previous world record with a throw distance of just over 14 meters, easily clearing her path to gold. And the U.S. women's wheelchair basketball team won a close game against Great Britain, propelling them to the semifinals. And still to come on the NewsHour, a contemporary artist takes the ancient tradition of basket weaving in new directions. And a retired scientist teaches others how to experience nature without sight.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Today in New Hampshire, Vice President Kamala Harris unveiled more of her economic plans, proposing tax breaks for new small businesses and a change to the capital gains tax.
If you earn $1 million a year or more, the tax rate on your long-term capital gains will be 28% under my plan, because we know When the government encourages investment, it leads to broad-based economic growth and it creates jobs, which makes our economy stronger.
Now, that is a smaller increase on investment income tax than what President Biden has called for in his latest budget proposal. The economy and inflation are top priorities for voters. And on the trail, Harris and former President Donald Trump have highlighted their different approaches if elected in November. Our White House correspondent has been covering both candidates' plans, and she joins us now. Laura Barone-Lopez, always good to have you here. So let's start with Vice President Harris, then just walk us through the key points in her economic plans that she says will lower costs for everyday Americans.
So in addition to the capital gains tax she proposed, today she also announced that she wants to do a $50,000 tax deduction on expenses for small businesses. That's an increase in the tax break from $5,000 for startups. She also has a goal of 25 million new business applications in her first term were she to win. And this builds on other key proposals that she's already outlined as early as last month of her economic proposals that include the construction of 3 million new housing units, $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers, a federal ban on price gouging food and groceries, and she wants to raise the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Now, she also wants to permanently expand the child tax credit to $6,000 for middle and low income families for the first year of their child's life. And she's also made the promise that President Biden made, which was to not raise taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year. So ultimately, a lot of her proposals are very similar to President Biden's.
What about when you compare them to former President Trump? How do they differ?
Economic policy is not necessarily a regular part of Donald Trump's stump speech, but Donald Trump has claimed that he plans to fix inflation on day one.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will sign an executive order directing every cabinet secretary and agency head to use every tool and authority at their disposal to defeat inflation and to bring consumer prices rapidly down. It will be a whole of government effort to raise the standard of living and make American life affordable again.
Donald Trump has provided little specifics on how exactly he would lower inflation, but here's what we do know about his economic policy. He said that he wants to cut taxes for corporations, lowering the rate from 21% to 15%, eliminate taxes on tips and Social Security benefits, institute a 10 to 20% tariffs on all foreign goods with an extra focus on China, imposing tariffs of 60% on Chinese imports. And he wants to make those 2017 tax cuts permanent. Now, those 2017 tax cuts, which saw the corporate rate be implemented at 21% and individual tax cuts across all earners, especially top earners. Those tax cuts are going to expire next year, so he wants to make them permanent.
So when you take a step back here, big picture, when you compare what we see is the Harris vision and the Trump vision, what are sort of the key differences here?
The biggest differences are on their housing, taxes, tariffs, and mass deportation of migrants proposals when it comes to how it will impact the economy. My producer, Shrey Poppet, and I spoke to multiple economists, including Mark Zandi, who's the chief economist at Moody's. And Zandi joked that you put 10 economists in a room and they'll come out with 20 opinions. But overall, he cited warnings from 16 Nobel laureate economists saying that that Trump's plans would increase inflation, and that's also what Moody's found.
I think President Trump's policies would lead to a somewhat diminished economy, not a recession, but a diminished economy, slower growth, somewhat higher unemployment, but ultimately higher inflation and higher deficits and debt. And if you're a high-income household, a high-net-worth household, you'll certainly do better under President Trump. But I think if you're a kind of a middle-income American, you're a lower-income American, you'll do better under President Harris.
One of the similarities, Mark Zandi said, is that proposal to eliminate taxes on tips that both have said they want to do. But a lot of the economists say that people who necessarily rely on tips for their well-being don't pay that much in taxes to begin with. So they question the impact. And overall, the attitudes of the two candidates are very different on the economy. Trump's campaign arguing that his is about a less globalized approach and that he wants to promote investment. Harris is much more focused on the middle class, specifically parents and housing.
So as you talk to the experts and they look at both sets of policy proposals, what do they say could be the biggest impacts of those proposals?
One of the proposals that multiple economists raised was Trump's plan for mass deportations of millions of undocumented migrants. J.D. Vance, his running mate, has said that that plan is their housing plan, that ultimately U.S. citizens are fighting for housing with U.S. migrants, and that deporting millions of migrants could make housing more affordable. We spoke to Michael Strain, who's an economist at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, and he said that that proposal would be detrimental to the economy.
What that would do would be to remove, hundreds of thousands, maybe even more undocumented workers from workplaces. When you walk into the grocery store, the price of fresh produce would go up, the price of renting a hotel room would go up, the price of a restaurant meal would go up. Maybe the price of home construction.
Strain said ultimately the way to fix the housing crisis is to build more homes. But also when it comes to impacts, Amna, the nonpartisan Penn Wharton budget model conducted an analysis of both the candidates' proposals and found that Trump's proposals increase the national debt more than $5 trillion over 10 years. By comparison, Harris's plan would add over $1 trillion over the same amount of time.
What about when you talk to voters? I mean, this is the number one issue for them. What do they think about these plans?
This is consistently, as you said, Amna, the top issue for voters across the spectrum. A new NBC poll out today found that Gen Z voters, 18 to 29-year-olds, say that inflation and cost of living is their top issue. And we spoke to a number of voters in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Robert Nix, who voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020, said that he feels like Trump just says whatever people want to hear, and he doesn't like Trump's proposal on tariffs. We also spoke to Ethan Lentz, who voted for Trump in 2020, but is disenchanted with him now and said he's not a fan of necessarily either candidate's policies and feels that Trump's are too vague, while Harris's price gouging is something that he's, price gouging federal ban on that is something that he's skeptical about on that.
All right, Laura Barone Lopez with a look at both candidates' proposals here. Laura, great reporting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's Justice Department indictments alleging ongoing Russian efforts to spread disinformation come just 2 months before Election Day. Moscow's attempts to interfere in U.S. and other elections are nothing new, though their tactics and strategy are constantly evolving. Before today's announcement, special correspondent Simon Ostrovsky recently sat down with an investigative journalist who spent years uncovering Russian operations about yet another effort to sow doubt and chaos, this time using artificial intelligence.
Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has a new plan to influence Western countries in this election year. Russia's CIA, which goes by its initials too, SVR, plans to use artificial intelligence to mask a sophisticated effort to interfere in a third straight U.S. presidential election. First, a quick tour of 2016.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Russian intelligence hacked the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign chair. Thousands of emails were then dumped in a coordinated fashion to influence the race. And that's not to mention the operations of Russian troll farms that created thousands of digital sock puppet soldiers to repeat and repeat and repeat messages that boosted Donald Trump at Hillary Clinton's expense.
They've declared war, full-scale hot war, information war on the rest of the world.
The man who helped uncover this new effort is Christo Grozev, an investigative journalist who's unmasked many intelligence operations. Perhaps most famously, he found the operatives who poisoned the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2020 and helped Navalny, who died in a Russian prison this past February, confront one of his assailants.
You've discovered a program that the Russian security services are trying to develop. What is this program actually about?
we got access to a mailbox belonging to a senior intelligence officer working undercover of a commercial company in Russia. And that mailbox contained initially reports that criticized the handling of the global propaganda effort by Russia, saying we're losing to the West, we're losing to the Ukrainians. Everybody loves Ukraine, everybody hates Russia. We have to change something about this. They've decided to use AI and use all kind of new methods to make it indistinguishable from the regular flow of information we're getting.
We know that Russia has been trying to pit Western societies against themselves, at least since the 2016 election. What's different about this new effort that you've discovered?
They will infiltrate Western organizations, some of them organizations that are even in defense of Western values. They're going to infiltrate pro-Ukrainian organizations, and within those organizations create disruption. They're going to make unreasonable demands to Western leaders, making Western societies tire and get annoyed with these Ukrainian demands, in quotation marks. They're no longer going to defend Russia. They're going to just cause disruption within Western societies.
They're no longer going to be trying to convince our societies that Russia's great. They're just going to use various different methods to make us angry at each other, angry at our allies, angry at Ukraine.
That is exactly so. And that's both bad news and good news. The good news part of it is that they realize that the ship has sailed on trying to convince the rest of the world that Russia is a power for good.
Who's taking the lead in this project? Who's running it?
This is the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia. And traditionally, SVR. They're essentially criticizing the other agencies as having failed so far. And they've propositioned this to the Kremlin as, let us take care of this. We know how to do it better. And initially we thought this may be just one proposal that may not have been accepted, but follow-up documents that we found show us that the program has been approved, recruitment has started, and there's even a document, which is a letter to the head of the SVR, Naryshkin, which instructs him to allocate particular people to this program who will work under the cover of Kremlin officials.
Is there anything you can tell me about how you got this information?
Since the war started, the source of data from Russian databases has become both harder to get and easier to get. Harder because there's a lot of clampdown on data providers, and easier because there's so many whistleblowers and hacktivists, actually Russian hackers, who go and hack mailboxes of government officials. And the latter is what happened with us right now. The name of the author of the program is Mikhail Kolesov. And interestingly, he admits to being a high-level SVR officer in his own CV that I've made available to you.
In his resume.
In his resume.
Incredible.
Kolosov's resume states that he's worked for the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia since 2001 and oversees 40 agents. He lists among his achievements the rollout of 1,500 propaganda campaigns that supported achieving Russia's goals in the international arena. He also boasts of receiving a medal in 2019 for developing new sources of information for the country's top leadership. Grozev was also able to obtain Kolosov's ID badge from an email attachment, revealing the SVR agent's face for the first time.
Notably, he has two different resumes in his mailbox, one for the common people like you and us, and for the real bosses, he actually admits to having worked for the last 19 years as a senior officer in the SVR. And the SVR officer who is delegated to this program, is seconded to this program and travels around the world, his name is Andrei Sherbakov. And he has a diplomatic passport, and we expect he will be able to travel to Western Europe and the United States. Maybe not after this program.
I read in one of the documents that you got access to that they plan on actually hijacking our personal communication devices. What does that mean?
They plan to do insertion of advertising, which is in fact hidden as news, and in this way bombard the target population with things that may be misconstrued as news, but are in fact advertising content. They plan to disguise that advertising content on a person-to-person level as if it is content from their favorite news sites. Now, we haven't seen that in action, but it's an intent, and they claim they've developed the technology to do that. They're very explicit that they're not going to use Russia-related platforms or even separate platforms. They're going to infiltrate the platform that the target already uses. And that is what sounds scary. If they've developed anything like that, then we would not know that one sentence from what we read in the New York Times, for example, has been altered just for you as a reader to mislead you in what the content, the meaning of the article is.
Then the target is you and I and the general public.
The target is the general public on a mass but custom-made scale. They specifically talk about using AI to customize the message based on the biases and preferences of each individual user. And while before they couldn't do that even with a troll farm run by Prigozhin in St. Petersburg of 10,000 people, because you can only customize it to 10,000 targets. Now with AI, you can do that to tens of millions of people.
The documents hacked from Kolosov's inbox describe in stilted bureaucratic language an ambitious plan to shake the so-called main adversary, aka the West, to its very foundations by secretly influencing key figures with new disinformation techniques. The text reads, "It is proposed that the theme of our campaign in countries of the main adversary be the stimulation of fear in recipients, the strongest emotion in human psychology."
The same team from Russia's foreign intelligence that is behind this global program is doing specific hit jobs on specific enemies of the Russian state. These hit jobs go under the cover program name Ledorub, which means ice pick. It's because ice pick is what Stalin organized the assassination of Trotsky with last century. And there's no doubt that this is the meaning of this character assassination tool.
Now it seems like they're being much more targeted and trying to essentially send disinformation to specific key individuals around a target.
They have a term in Russian which is to make him unhandshakeable, somebody that nobody will want to engage with on a day-to-day basis.
The program's goals are, of course, much broader than individual Kremlin opponents, and is one more thing for U.S. news consumers to watch for as the election approaches. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Simon Ostrovsky in New York.
The ancient native tradition of weaving baskets is now grabbing the attention of the contemporary art world, with one artist taking the form in new directions. Jeffrey Brown takes us to Maine for our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
That one right there is a large, healthy brown ash. You see how similar it looks to the white?
A walk in the woods near his Eddington, Maine home with Jeremy Frey in search of brown ash trees, whose pliable wood has made them so valued in the Wabanaki Indian basket-making tradition for centuries, and for Frey today.
So that right there is a perfect basket tree. See how straight it is? There's no knots, no branches. I'll be making a basket out of that someday.
You will?
Yeah.
These days, the fruits of Frey's work can be found in very different settings, art museums. In a first major survey titled Woven at the Portland Museum of Art, as well as in the collections of leading institutions, including New York's Metropolitan Museum. Baskets of different sizes, shapes, patterns, colors, made over the last 20 years, featuring innovations and refinements Frey introduced, such as fine weaves and double wall baskets, one within another.
If you duck way down, there's color under there that you can never see.
I
just did that for me.
All of it building on centuries of knowledge and craft.
Weaving is so simple. It's up, down, over, and under. I mean, it's this simple binary process. Like you get your ones, you get your zeros. And how do you make that more?
The making of baskets, weaving, has been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
All over the world.
Yeah.
You like being part of that history?
I do like being part of that history. But I had this thought the other day that in thousands or tens of thousands of years of nearly every culture in the world doing this, no one's ever done what I've done.
Frey refers to the baskets as woven sculptures. And for this exhibition, he's also played with form in new ways, creating flat prints, a kind of basket vortex that spirals into the wall, and a video capturing the making and fiery loss of a basket.
I have this duality going. I want to exist as a contemporary artist, but I also have a native side to me that is always going to be present, and this work comes directly from that. And it's like balancing that, doing that in a respectful way is important, but also, stating, that this is me.
A member of the Passamaquoddy Nation, Frey grew up on the Indian Township Reservation near Maine's border with Canada. He can trace basket making back 7 generations in his family. In his studio, there are baskets made by his grandfather. But Frey himself didn't come to it until his 20s, when he sought to get past a rough time of drug use that had begun in his teens. Drug abuse would lead to the loss of many of his friends. His mother, also a basket maker, suggested he take up weaving to keep focused and busy.
I just needed to reset my life. I remember it being very frustrating. It was probably partially what I was going through, but also just trying to learn these techniques and you know, the tension of the wood tends to want to spring apart at times.
Sort of a metaphor for life, isn't it?
It really is.
When you're telling me what you're going through at that time, resetting your own life.
Yeah, and challenging myself at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it at the time, but I think the act of weaving kind of helped save my life.
He learned traditional techniques and then began developing his own. Every basket a result of weeks and months of work. Pounding, spraying, scraping, splitting, gauging, cutting, dyeing, weaving. In addition to ash, he works with sweetgrass for braiding, cedar bark, and porcupine quills for the tops of baskets. All he's gathered or harvested himself. Why is it important to do it this way? Come into the woods, find the exact right?
For me, so some people buy their material. But for me, I find when you harvest your own material, there's something spiritual about that. But beyond that, you get the exact quality you want. Having that connection, it's part of basketry.
He learned first from elders, including members of the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, a group intent on preserving and furthering the craft. He began to take his work to craft buyers, gaining attention and winning prizes, including in 2011, Best in Show at the renowned Santa Fe Indian Market.
We continue on in the exhibition.
And then the art world, eager to expand its boundaries of contemporary art, began to take notice. The Portland Museum of Art's Rami Mize is co-curator of this show.
Baskets of this kind were seen within the dichotomy and a sort of perceived hierarchy of art and craft, art versus craft. And so much of what Jeremy Frey is doing is attuning people to the extraordinary vision and genius behind these works that absolutely deserves to be considered within a quote unquote fine art context, but not abandoning the incredible craft roots and processes that bring it to life.
But even as basketry begins to reach new and growing museum audiences, it faces an existential threat from the emerald ash borer, an invasive beetle that's decimating North America's ash trees.
As what I'm doing as an artist peaks, I'm going to lose the material to actually do it. You can tell the same story with another material, but it won't be the same story. You can still make the image look similar, but it doesn't have the history, it doesn't have the cultural significance, the material isn't going to necessarily behave the same way.
For now, Frey is harvesting more trees than he needs and storing them against a grim future, while also enjoying the attention he's getting in what he admits is a very unexpected, even surreal present, including the packed opening for this exhibition.
It was intense, it was overwhelming. It still doesn't really feel like it happened. Like I don't know. At the end of the day, I just feel like a guy in his studio making baskets. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
The next stop for Jeremy Frey's exhibition, Woven, is at the Art Institute of Chicago, where it opens October 26. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown in Portland and Eddington, Maine.
And we'll be back shortly with a story of a retired scientist who started guiding a unique nature walk after losing his sight.
But first, take a moment to hear from your local PBS station. It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like the NewsHour on the air. For those of you staying with us, ask many preteens what's at the top of their wish list, and there's a good chance the answer will be skincare. In this Encore report, special correspondent and Washington Post columnist Catherine Rampell explores the growing market and concerns about this boom.
One of Emma Scott's must-have skincare products is her Glow Recipe Toner.
And if you smell it, it smells like really good.
Oh, yeah. Sort of fruity?
Mm-hmm.
The 10-year-old's preferred body butter, Sol de Janeiro.
This one is like a creamy consistency.
In her skincare fridge.
I really like this Laneige sleeping mask.
And for lip care, Summer Fridays Butter Balm.
Because it's like a limited edition. And I was like, oh, I really want this.
Scott does a multi-step skincare routine every morning and every evening.
In the morning, I'll do a face wash, a toner, a moisturizer, and my e.l.f. tinted SPF.
Move over, Barbie. Today's tweens are obsessed with expensive skincare. Products usually marketed to a much older, wealthier clientele. Households with tweens, aged 6 through 12, spent almost $2.5 billion on facial skincare last year, an annual spending increase of 27%, more than double the average.
I like that it's like kind of watery.
This is Scott's skincare crew, a group of friends and fellow skincare enthusiasts who meet daily, usually online, to bond over their beauty regimes.
I'm going to moisturize my hands.
The girls' parents are still getting up to speed.
I don't really use a whole lot of anything, so it's been very eye-opening for me.
Amy Scott is Emma's mother.
Sometimes I get her leftovers, so I have started using a gel moisturizer that she has turned me on to.
And you got her leftovers because she didn't like it?
No, she was just sick of using it. She always is looking for the newest thing.
Get ready with me for the day.
The newest thing as seen on social media.
First, I'm going to use these bronzer drops and then the oil. Let's do it.
YouTube and TikTok team with so-called skinfluencer content.
We're going to do pump and eyes after this. Okay. And then I go in with a little bit of this Paula's Choice moisturizer. Okay.
There are get ready with me videos of step-by-step routines.
I love that stuff. It makes my skin feel so good after putting that stuff on.
We got
Unboxing videos and PR hauls showcase the latest products.
Glow Recipe. Look how this box opens.
She sees this person opening this product and it's like, oh, I have to try that. It's very expensive. So it's trying to say, let's talk about this. Is it really worth it?
The most popular place to shop for skincare, Sephora.
First things first, we need to see if they have the new Sol de Janeiro body cream.
There's this girl that I watch, Allie Ross, and she goes to Sephora a lot.
Oh my God. You're kidding me.
And she'll like buy all these products.
How much do you think Emma has spent this year?
It's got to be hundreds.
Do they have the pink one?
We tagged along with the skincare crew on a recent visit as they browsed, tested, counted their money,
20, 30,
and spent.
Thank you.
Amy Scott insists Emma use her own money or gift cards from her birthday and other holidays. While this trend is certainly a boon for Sephora, others aren't totally sold.
We're seeing 10, 11, 12-year-old girls bring in a shopping bag of their 12-step routine that they're doing in the morning and their 10-step routine that they're doing at night.
Nava Greenfield is a dermatologist in Manhattan.
They might say, I want beautiful, flawless, perfect skin. And I'm looking at them thinking, you already have that. There are a few times in life where our skin is going to be more beautiful.
Next up, my Glow Recipe Firm Serum. Gotta keep those wrinkles away.
Greenfield blames influencers for convincing tweens that they need lotions and potions containing anti-aging agents like retinol and other active ingredients that can be harmful to young skin.
Ever since I took my mom's retinol and started using it, I swear I'm aging backwards. I look so young.
Just like adults will use Dr. Google to talk to me about their skin and about what they think is going on with their rash, adolescents do too.
So it's Dr. TikTok instead of Dr. Google.
Exactly, yes.
My friend's skin is gorgeous.
Greenfield says it's not just young girls who think they need extensive skincare.
I have adolescent boys coming in and asking about Botox.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
I tell them, you don't need Botox. I'm very direct. And I tell the girls too, I say, you have perfect skin. I can't help you.
I think it's mostly just wanting to fit in and feeling connected to their friends and being a part of the new trend and craze.
You guys know. But psychotherapist Sonia Rodriguez says the high cost can be a stressor.
This is a huge issue because a lot of parents can't afford this, and the kids feel like I can't keep up with my friends.
Post-pandemic tweens are also hyper aware of how they look on camera.
I think now with social media and the pressure that kids are constantly feeling with all of the products that they're seeing, how people are looking, the airbrushing, there's so much pressure on kids to look a certain way.
Emma Scott says her primping routine is just a hobby.
Doing it with my friends, it's really fun. And I feel like it's really relaxing. And I can sit up here and like watch a movie and just have a face mask on and do all that fun stuff.
Amy makes sure her daughter carefully weighs each purchase.
She'll say, this is at Sephora. I want to go see what it is, or I want to buy it. Well, why would you want to buy it? Because so-and-so has it. Well, that's no reason to buy something.
Dr. Greenfield admits there are some benefits to the skincare craze.
It's wonderful from my perspective that people are thinking about their skin and people are taking the health of their skin very seriously, more so than we ever used to. But it's important to strike a balance. If their goal is to have healthy skin, well, then that's really just about a cleanser, moisturizer, and sunscreen. You really don't need anything more than that.
Believe me or not. Despite what you might hear from Dr. TikTok. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Catherine Rampell in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Finally tonight, the story of a man who found meaning in darkness. In this story from KPBS's Corey Suzuki and Carolyn Corellis, we visit the Tijuana River Estuary in Southern California, where a volunteer is leading a tour that encourages visitors to experience nature a little differently.
Good question. Let me see. Yes, this is lemonade berry. And as the leaves are thick and leathery, almost like the tongue of a leather shoe. I've learned to identify about almost 40 plants just by touch and also smell. All right, Gidget, here we go. My name is Ron Peterson. I'm 73 years old. I'm a retired scientist and engineer. I live here in Imperial Beach, and I am blind. And we are here at the Tijuana Estuary. This is one of my homes away from home. There's several nature walks and there's several bird walks. And one of those nature walks is mine. I'm a docent for this nature walk called the Eye-Opening Experience Without Sight, where a blind person leads a nature walk and introduces visitors to the native plants with the emphasis on the other four senses besides sight. Well, let's start over here with a very special plant right over here. Everyone take a whiff and tell me what you think.
I don't love it.
Oh, because I don't love it. Most people don't care for it all that much. And this plant is actually called bladder pod, and I think you can see why it has the name bladder pod. One reason I know this is buckwheat is I've worked here as a volunteer for about 9 years, planting native plants and clearing trails. But then 5 years ago, things kind of went south for me. Glaucoma. I lost my vision, and I couldn't work here anymore. I couldn't do the things that I was doing.
I'm going to end.
A couple of years ago, the idea came
I'll
up
edit it and see what I want to keep.
since I had already learned